Greetings YouTube. Today I'm going to review the game Ironclaw. Now I've only done a single read through of this game, so if I get anything horribly wrong I apologize, and constructive criticism is welcome. Now Ironclaw is an anthropomorphic animal game. What this means is that every character in this game is going to be a humanoid animal. Think of the animated Disney film Robin Hood, Pinky and the Brain. These are classic examples of humanoid anthropomorphic animals. So if this is the kind of thing you like, this game is up your alley. If this is the kind of thing that you don't like and it makes you think of the furry community, this may be a game you want to avoid. Now there are 24 races to play in the game. I find it interesting that all of the races, from apes to wolves, are mammals. There are no insects, no amphibians, no reptiles, and no birds. I didn't see an explanation anywhere in the game why this was so, but it's so. The game is set in a kind of pseudo-early Renaissance fantasy setting, so firearms are just moving in, but all of the classic fantasy tropes are still there. Heavy armor, you know, barbarians, the whole nine yards. So the first thing you do is you're going to pick your race. And once you do that, that starts the ball rolling. When you create your characters, you're given 6 dice to play with. Now this game uses the full range of dice. 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12-sided. In fact, this game uses more 12-sided dice than any other game I have ever encountered before. I was quite impressed because the 12-sided die has always been one I've kind of been fond of, and very rarely do games give it enough time. And you get 6 dice to spread out between your body, speed, mind, will, your race, and your career. Yes, you actually put a score in your race. And the reasoning behind this is that if you put a very low score in this, say you put a die 4 in there, that means you're a very civilized sort. You're not particularly animalistic. Whereas if you put a die 12 in there, the maximum you can have as a beginning character, you're very much the paragon of your species. You are a bear with a capital B, for example. You were given a die 12, a die 10, 2 die 8, a die 6, and a die 4 to spread between these 6 stats. You are also given some character points to spend on skills and gifts, and you can acquire flaws to get more character points so you can then buy more gifts and skills and things like that. Now, every race has certain racial traits. For example, bears have a bite, a claw, and are very strong. Now, these all have a point cost to them, and you have to pay for them out of your character points. This means that all of the animal types, all of the animal species, are balanced with each other, so that those races with a lot of character options as far as their race is concerned. For example, bats are very costly. They fly. So it's going to take a lot of character points to get all the skills you're going to, all the physical requirements to be able to fly properly. So you're not going to have a lot of character points left over, though they also have a built-in flaw, frail, because they're lightly boned. And for the next example, the rhinoceros. Lots of armor, very strong, got a tusk attack, a horn attack, but they have poor vision, so that helps to balance things out slightly. They're still a costly race to play because their armor is pretty strong. Now, this is going to mean that some races, like the boar, will be more flexible when it comes to skills and gifts than will a rhinoceros. Because a boar only has one racial characteristic, tusks. That's it. So if you're looking for a class that's geared towards a specific build, obviously rhinoceros make really good fighters, barbarian type things, that's what you're going to pick. But if you're looking for a more generalist race, you're going to pick one that has few characteristics like that, like a boar. Now, the game uses a modified dice pool. Now, to my mind, when I say dice pool, I usually think of you roll a bunch of dice, you see how many successes you get, and if you have enough successes, you succeed at the current task, usually against a static number. you need 5 successes to succeed. And more experienced people have more dice to roll. This is slightly different. You have multiple dice to roll on many things, but all of these can be different numbers. It could be a die 12, a die 4, and a die, something like that. So you can be multiple things at the same time. The dice do not stack. Just like in a standard dice pool, they are read as individual results. So you can have, for example, a racial skill of climb if you're a monkey. You can have a career skill from climb, say you're playing something rogue-like, and you can have bought skill points in climb, which means you're really good at climbing. So you'll have 3 dice to roll when it's time to climb. And you're rolling all those dice against someone else's roll, which is the game master, or as this game calls them, the game host. So the game host says, okay, this is a moderately difficult climb. It's going to be 2 die 8. So he rolls 2 die 8, gets a 6 and a 2, for example. You get to roll your 3 dice, and you hope that you get higher than him. If you get higher than him, you succeed. If you get 5 points higher than him, not really possible for a beginning character, really, is you're going to have an overwhelming success. Good things happen. If you miss it by 5 points, that is an overwhelming failure. Bad things happen. And if you get a 1 on a single die, that's a botch. Now, the advantages of having more than 1 die to roll is that you can't get a botch unless all the die are 1. So that means when you're starting to roll 2 and 3 dice, you're not going to botch very often. So that's a good thing. Now, every skill in this, and this is a skill-based game, every skill can have a favored use. Now, a favored use is something that is specific to that skill for you. So, for example, you're a big bear barbarian, you've got an axe skill, and your favored use is when fighting weasels. So anytime you fight a weasel, you have your favored use comes into play. And what the favored use does is if you roll a 1, you get to re-roll it, potentially getting a much higher number, potentially even being better than the other die you've rolled. So that's an advantage. Every skill can only have 1 favored use, though it could be changed over time. But this could be for climbing. You could have climb, favored use, trees. You could have dance, favored use, hip-hop. You could have any skill in the game can have a favored use. So that's kind of nice. I think it gives it some nice flavor, and it's very open to interpretation. Anything a player can come up with, so long as the host says it's okay. Okay? This whole game is very open, very dynamic, very flexible, very rules light. So people who like a system that is not overly complex, this is going to be your gig. The book is fairly heavy as far as page count goes, but that's mostly because there are lots of examples in here because this is a different take on dice pool. So they really explain this thoroughly from beginning to end. And the list of all the skill examples is exhaustive. Every single skill is given usually multiple examples unless it's a really simple skill. All the skills, as I mentioned, I've already given an example. And combat's the same way. You roll multiple dice to hit, all depending on which one you're using. Like you use your body, because you're strong, and your axe skill against someone else, and they're rolling their soak die, reminiscent of Savage World. They're rolling their armor, either natural or artificial, plate armor, chain, things like that, and they also get to use one of 3 different defense options, blocking, dodging, and parrying, all of which would have their own skill points so that you could then have a die, it could be a die 4, a die 6, die 8, whatever. So you have different ways of preventing the damage from getting through to you. And if this all fails and the damage gets through to you, you get hurt. The magic works the same way. The spell has a complexity, say 2 die 6, your skill, you roll against the GM's roll. If you do it higher, you win. Spells also have a spell point cost. So you say, I'm going to cast this spell, it costs me 3 points. You roll to see if you succeed. If you succeed, the spell goes off. If you don't, you've lost the points. The spell fails. Now, one nice feature in this is if you raise your spell casting ability up to the point that it is equal to the cost of a spell, so you bring it up your skill level to skill level 3, and that means all the spells you know at skill level 3 now no longer need a skill roll. You automatically succeed. I think this is a nice bonus. I think this really gives a sense of accomplishment for spellcasters. You know, that, hey, I know this spell so well, I just pay the cost for it, and it works. I like that. Now, I think this is an interesting idea. It's very dynamic, very random in many ways. But I also think it's going to mean a lot of rolling. It is an incredibly high number of rolls. And if you're the GM, you're going to be rolling handfuls of dice every single time there's a combat. I do not want to imagine a large-scale combat in this game. It just seems like it would be burdensome to a game master. I don't like that aspect of these rules. I've asked around online, and some people say once you get into it and once you get used to the whole process, it flows pretty nicely. And as a GM hint, use dice of all the same color. So have every NPC is all green, and this NPC is all red. So when you're rolling a dice, even though they're different die sizes, different dice sides, you know who you're rolling for. It's a nice idea. Now, like I said, it comes with a fairly generic setting, and I frankly think it was a little lackluster. I mean, this is an original or fairly original concept. You know, all the races are animals, and yet they stuck it into a plug, ugly, really normal fantasy setting. Very much pseudo-Europe, with all the standard plate armor and knights and wizards, and it just comes across as very, very prosaic when so much else of the system is so interesting. I was a little disappointed. Now, there is a Asian version of this game called Jadeclaw, and I actually have the Jadeclaw kicking around. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, and I may do that at some point. I'm probably going to take a break, though, and read something else. Well, I already am, actually. But this is an interesting game. I'm not sure it's something that is really going to interest me, because it's a little too open. I think there's too many decisions that are going to have to be made by the GM on the fly, and I prefer a rule system that handles a lot of that for me. And I know that means people think that's a bad thing. I don't. I'm okay with that. But for those that like a fairly open, loose system of rules, don't mind a different take on a dice pool concept, this game could work for you. And particularly if you like anthropomorphic animals. For my anthropomorphic game of choice would still be the 4th edition of Gamma World, purchased in 1992, but, that's just me. I'm old school in that regard, I guess. So, if you haven't checked out Ironclaw, and you'd like to, and you like dice pool games, this is definitely going to be something that you're going to want to look at. So, for many people, I recommend this. Just maybe not me.